It's a couple minutes after the hour. So I'd like to officially welcome everyone to the art of visual inquiry, increasing your understanding with connections. Today's section is all about creating a meaningful context for your environment. So whether you're a self-learner or a researcher researching the next heart surgery, you can sort of have it all in your brain. So I've actually got a number of brains on my screen here that we're going to go ahead and go through. The first brain is all about music and my piano, and then I've got another brain here on science, and I've got a teacher and teaching and learning brain and a writer's brain. So you can actually have multiple brains on a wide variety of topics, or you can sort of have one gargantuous brain that has it all. So I'm going to kick things off with my piano brain. And one of the advantages of the brain is the ability to visualize all the vast array of internet information, your study notes, your files, and pull it all together in a way that's meaningful to you. So one time I was on the phone with a professor, and he asked me, why do you need the brain, Shelley? Why can't I just Google everything? And of course, Google and the internet itself, when it brings back all those search results, that's great. But what you want to do when you're assimilating knowledge is connect it in a way that these connections create a larger picture or a perspective on the information. And through those connections and perspective, that's how we assimilate and transform the information into knowledge. So it is inherently a transformative process. And that is actually why the brain is so relevant, because you can grab a YouTube video, a PDF you might have, a connection maybe to an intranet site of academia, or your intranet on your company intranet, and bring it all together in a way that makes sense. And in that assimilation process, you're actually going to learn and discover things that you wouldn't normally see if we were just looking at a linear folder system. So in this particular example, and that you can make these things very fun and very exciting. This is all a brain that I created several years back to teach myself how to play the piano. So you can do fun things like this. So every thought in the brain can be connected to other things. And I just have my distant thought display on. I'll go ahead and minimize that just so you can see. So when you're starting to create a brain on a particular subject for visual inquiry, as we say, or learning, what you want to do is create a network of thoughts that actually represent key aspects of what you're trying to accomplish with your subject matter. So for me, in learning the piano, there were several things. First of all, inspiring artists. So if you have brains on just different artists that I'm interested in, to techniques that I might be studying, from classical piano to musical phrasing, to also researching, and this is a good one for students or academia who are putting together teams, just different courses that I'm interested in, just kind of mapping out all my course choices, whether they're online or just different links to, there's a Harrison School of Music here in LA, different voice and piano students, just different teachers that I might want to have. So just because I have a teacher or a great professor also doesn't mean that I don't need to assimilate my knowledge and use the brain. So it's great for that. So as I'm thinking about the courses I'm going to take, the techniques, looking at keyboard styles, this is all coming together in my brain. So rather than just having a notepad or constantly looking up, where these schools are, or Googling this or that, I have it here organized, so it's readily accessible. And this helps me sort of gain control over the context. And you can personalize it. You can see I've added, and I hope it's not too loud, some musical notes, treble clef background, because that helps me. That gets my creative juices flowing. So learning can be a very fun, fluid thing in the brain. And every time I click on a thought, that's going to trigger all related pieces of information. And a thought can have any type of information attached to it. So I've just clicked on my jazz thought here, and you can see I've actually got a web link to the Wikipedia. So here I've got my definition of jazz, and I can come in, and if I want to take a note on this fall, I'm going to learn how to play, let's say, Linus and Lucy. So, I'm just going to make some notes. I can come in here and timestamp things and set the date. So I know that, I've kind of set this goal today, right now in my brain. And of course, I've got the definition. And from there, I actually have different things linked, things that are on the internet, as well as just different documents here as well that I've got. So for instance, Linus and Lucy. So that's one of my goals. I actually have a web link to this in my brain. And of course, I can go ahead and just see that play in the content frame in the Brain 9. So one of the cool things about the Brain is it's actually going to contextualize this. So I'm going to go ahead, and I'm not going to play this right now because I'm in the webcam, but I've got these different links here and these different YouTube videos that you can actually go ahead and watch within the context of your brain. So the reason that's cool, and I'll just play a little, we'll watch this guy play a little bit as I'm chatting so we can kind of get a sense of what's going on, is a lot of the information is online. It's real time. In fact, we may, if time permits, show you an example of how heart surgeons across the U.S. are literally linking to surgery techniques on YouTube along with their PDFs. So video content, in addition to web, in addition to documents, and here he goes and he's playing, and as he's playing a Moby song here. I can go ahead and add a note. So I'm going to say dark tones that are interesting, sort of inspiring me to think about some darker musical genres that I might want to do, and take a note or whatever, or go back to that. So all kinds of sort of mixed modalities come together in the brain. And the other thing that's great about the brain is, you've seen I've got some content here, but the content's going to keep growing. So I'm on the artist Moby. He's under jazz and R&B and inspiring artists. You'll notice that I can have one particular topic effectively categorized under multiple subjects. Now it may seem very obvious and intuitive in the brain, but if I were having to figure out where to store all these Moby YouTube videos and musical annotations in a folder, I'd have to pretty well decide, do I want it under my piano lessons, under inspiring artists, under jazz, under R&B, and I'd have to choose. With the brain, I can have as many connections as possible. So we're not limiting the knowledge. We're actually organizing by connection rather than separation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go ahead and add content to this area on Moby. So I'm going to search the web for this artist. So I'm just going to go ahead to options, and let me just show you where, and I hit search web, and then I'm going to go out and use Google. Of course, your search engine and searching the web is very important and very paramount to using the brain. But the thing is, here we're getting a lot of interesting stuff happening. So there's I'm just looking. There's a new Netflix documentary happening here. That's kind of interesting. There's a couple other things, has some interviews. So this is really cool for me. I've got the videos. I kind of like reflecting on the artist. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to drag and drop some of these links into the brain. So let me just go ahead, and I can do this straight from my Google search, simply drag and drop. And I've got this now article from Vague News on the Moby documentary. I can continue to do this. There's some information on his what's going on Billboard, and I'm literally adding and I'm building a knowledge base. So in addition to assimilating knowledge, I'm creating this visual database, this visual knowledge base, if you will, of content that's relevant to me. And it's very easy to do. Of course, I can actually go to any one of these web pages. So if I want to go to this other article from Live Kindly on his new documentary series, we'll go ahead and load that. And from there, of course, I can drag and drop that link from that browser address window again. And it looks like this site's taking a little long to load with the YouTube. Let me just go ahead and drag and drop it in anyway so you can see how that's done. Here we go. And so I'm just dragging that in as well. And now I've got this site in also. So when I have all this information, so for instance, this new documentary, this is now in my brain, and this is framed in my content window as well. So you'll notice I've kind of got the side-by-side area, but I can turn my screen to what works better for me. So side-by-side is nice if you have a larger monitor, but in this case, I also like to go top-down, and we're actually presenting in a lower resolution just so the webcam streams nicely. But you can see these new web pages, the pages that I added are just like appearing here really nicely, and I can, turn it to the side. This might be a little bit better for viewing articles, but you get a sense. I can also go ahead and do some interesting things as far as copying articles. I can actually go ahead and take screen grabs and paste them as thought icons. So if I want to go ahead and maybe capture an image of this artist, I can just go over here and then go and grab, and I just have to go ahead and grab whatever I want. Let me do that again so you get I get a nicer image of Moby. Well, if I want to just grab the title of this or whatever, I can do that. And now I've got this particular image attached to this. So there's a very nice way to go ahead and add content. Just show you a few more things here in terms of images. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this image, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to paste this as an icon on this artist. So now I've got his image as well as a zoomable icon. So there is a very visual nature. So the reason we're talking about the art of visual inquiry is in addition to assimilating and bringing the information together, we're actually stimulating the visual cortex and enabling you to get more meaning out of your information by creating this almost multi-sensory experience, as you will, to look at all the information. And of course, this is just an image, but if we go into other things, let me go into chord progressions, for instance. You can actually go ahead and let's go to chords and actually add diagrams. So in this case, I've got the major chords, a screenshot of the keyboard as well as the notes here. And, that's in techniques. And techniques take me into, if I want to go into musical phrasing or scales or anything like that, I can go ahead and do that. And I've got different aspects of content appearing either attached that appear in the content window, or of course, I can actually have icons appearing, as you've seen in this particular example, as the zoomable icon. So I'll just show you a few more examples here. In my chord section, I actually have, of course, images, and I've got links to stuff, but then I've also got zoomable icons on some of this stuff as well. So it's very clear how it all comes together. So that's just one example. Another example that I want to talk to you a little bit about, because we're talking about grabbing information and repurposing it for learning, is a Science Heroes example. Now, this particular site I actually love. It's called scienceheroes.com. It's a great site, but in essence, the site is in all its relevant context, and I'll just go ahead and open it here in another window so you guys can, or see, or let's keep it in the brain window. It basically just has all scientists throughout history, but they're listed by list. You have a lot of top 10 lists. Now, all these lists are great, but I want to organize this information and research in a way that suits my purposes. What I'm interested in is disease and treatments, food innovation, key scientists that speak to me, medical techniques, science for children. So what I've done is I've created a brain that basically serves as a remote control to this site. And this is a great example, especially for you corporate users that are inundated with, Microsoft SharePoint, your corporate sites, or in academia, there's a ton of research sites, wikis out there. And yes, some academic organized it in the way they think it's appropriate. But what you want to do is you want to take that stuff and you want to sculpt a view that makes sense for what you're doing. So that's what this brain is here. So just to give you an idea here in medical techniques, I've gone ahead and I've mapped out different areas from CPR to oral rehydration therapy. And then under that, I have links to this particular site that makes sense to me. So let's just go to Jude James, and there's his web page. And of course, if I want to go ahead and add any more information on what he does, and he found a way to restart the heart without cutting, so that's pretty cool. So we have him under CPR, and as well as inspirational research. And of course, he may not be related on the site to somebody named Alfred Summer, but Alfred Summer discovered all kinds of treatments for children in terms of the effects of vitamins, vitamin A, and so forth. So I've linked him as well under inspirational research. But you can see in this site, he's just listed alphabetically, but in my brain, I've created my own context for him. So I've got him under food innovation, as well as amazing people, inspirational research, and vitamin supplements. So yeah, I can continue to build on this. So after looking at all my research, if I want to go ahead and create, let's say, a report on, let's say, the state of 2018 healthy living, just coming in here and I'm creating a new thought in my brain. Now from there, I've got this thought. I can go ahead and if I want to link to anything else in my brain, if I want to even move some information, this stuff on vitamin infused snack food that I did, vitamin supplements, that all makes sense. Maybe I'm going to link Alfred as a jump thought to this because he was a pioneer, if you will, in this field. But now I'm actually building a new project around the knowledge that I have assimilated in this brain. So first of all, I can actually go ahead and add any attachment. So if I want to go ahead and actually just start creating a Word document on healthy living, I can go ahead and do that. And it's actually going to go ahead and launch the file, and I can start typing information in, and I'm just going to save that. And that goes ahead and saves back into the area. Let me close this document, into my brain here in the content area. You can see I have that Word document attached. The other thing that the brain is great for is version control. So if I open this file again, and let me just do that real quick. It's a little slow with the web meeting, and I'm just going to add another change. So I'll say healthy living, change the font here, and pretend I've written all kinds of amazing things on healthy living. And I can save as, but I'm going to go ahead and just save as and save it in my current folder. And this will work just fine. And I'm actually saving it in my brain folder, but I'm going to go ahead and change this to version 2. So I'm going to save that because I know a lot of writers like to version their documents. So now you can see I've got the number 2 by this file. And in fact, I can take notes. I have got my 2 versions showing there, and I can say in version 2, we cover more about medical treatments. And maybe version 1 has something different. So this way, if I'm sharing my brain with everyone, or I want to come back to this file, this information that I've created, I've got both versions attached, but I've also got a note on kind of what the different versions are. And I can continue to build. So if I want to integrate existing information, that's just as easy. Maybe I want to look at Generation Z, the millennial generation, and what their eating habits are like. So I actually have some reports on Generation Z and kind of the next generation of the kids that are growing up and how they're eating. So I'm going to drag and drop this PDF into my brain, and so I've got this in here, and I'm also going to drag and drop this document on sports brands, because some of the sports brands are getting into energy infused vitamin drinks. So this research on healthy living is going to target that. So I've got my 2 documents in, and as you can see, I simply dragged and dropped, and they've gone ahead and they've been added in my brain. And what I will show you as well is if I click on that, it's actually going to display the PDF. It's quite nice. Let me just go ahead and move my brain so you can see. But this particular document appears right in the content viewer, and I can adjust the screen. So if I want to see more document here in this case on my how Gen Y and Gen Z relate to healthy living and so forth, I can adjust this too. So I've kind of got my little visual context over here, and now the documents kind of taking center. So with framing your knowledge, that's the other great thing. You know, the brain can be as ever present if you're, you know, analyzing information relationships, or as subtle as you need it to be. And of course, I can even come in here and adjust my font size. So I could actually make my font size quite a bit smaller here, and change the, you know, the parameters of this if I want to change the way this looks, or even hide my brain. So that's just an example of how you can work with the brain. Now I'm going to go to a larger brain here, moving away from science, to give you a sense of you know, what a brain would look like on all types of subjects. So this is my teaching and learning brain. And this particular brain has all kinds of topics on things from lesson planning to social sciences to, again, to health sciences as well. So as you can see, as I click on any thought in the brain, it's going to always bring all kinds of information. Now, anything below my active thought is a subcategory of information. So just like you would, you know, in terms of starting off to build a brain, I'm sort of, you create these child thoughts below. So for instance, if I wanted to create a new subject here on music, I could go ahead and do that. And in fact, I could even import some of my piano stuff into this brain. But let me just do that so you can see how easy it is. So I'm just creating a new section in this brain on learning, on music. And from there, I can go ahead and add thoughts. So I can add something on music theory if I want to, or music history, let's say. And I'll have another thought here on inspiring artists. I love that. I love to have inspirations. But we can see as I'm using this semicolon to create multiple thoughts. And I can also have a thought on classical music. So now I've just inputted several different ideas, and I hit enter. And now I'm starting to build that basic hierarchy on music in my brain, and I can continue to add to that. But I just wanted to show you that because as I'm kind of showing you some of these larger brains, some of the newer users especially might be wondering, well, gee, how did all this stuff get created? But as you can see, it's pretty easy. And then from there, you know, classical music, you can get into different periods, the Baroque period, you know, 50s music, swing, jazz, all that kind of stuff. And it comes together quite nicely. But I'm actually going to go into my science section, an area that's built out. And I want to talk to you a little bit now, not just about thought relationships, but about thought typing and tagging as well. So I'm going to go into biology and life sciences here. And I'm going to actually I've got my distant thoughts on. I'm going to go ahead and close and minimize those just so we can see. And I'm going to go into the human body here. So again, I'm using zoomable icons. But what you'll notice is that certain thoughts in this brain have different colors. So I've got a yellow color to represent biological system. I've got a blue color to represent disease. And these are what we call thought types. And a type can be this sort of a typology that you can use throughout your brain. So let me just give you an example. If I actually go over to my thought types, I can open a list of all my different thought types. I've got thought types for human systems, neurotransmitters, political parties, because there's a political science section in this brain, all kinds of things. So for instance, if I want to go, if I just want to look at everything in my brain that is a neurotransmitter in the neurology section, I can click on that thought type and it's going to pull everything up that has the that is a thought typed as a neurotransmitter. And if I want to go ahead and study, look at, for instance, acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter, I can do that. And that takes me to a link I have here on the Wikipedia. And I also have that connected to disease thought type, which is Alzheimer's, which is Alzheimer's disease is affected by, the theory is, some levels of acetylcholine in the brain. So you can see how you can move very quickly to find information just by looking at very granular things. And of course, we can also do searches. So if I just want to do a search for first couple letters, I'm just going to type in diabetes, and I'll just start typing in the first couple letters, and everything just appears. And what the brain does is it actually indexes not just your thoughts, but the content that is attached to that information. So if you need to do some deep searching or you're building a very large database, you're always going to be able to find what you're looking for by search or using visual navigation. And each modality sort of has its own benefit. Search is great if you very specifically know what you want to look for and you don't want to, navigate around. Navigation is wonderful when you just want to explore and kind of get the larger picture on how things are connected. And just to give you an idea on how all these two things can come together, this article on diabetes prevention looks pretty cool. So I just clicked on that. It's launching the PDF. It's actually a PDF document that's appearing here. But it's also taking me to the area in the knowledge base where this document is. So it's not just showing me that list. I get that list, of course. Let me just pull up that list here so you can see this is what Google would give you or any standard desktop search, but you see how much more you're getting with the brain. So I also know that diabetes is related to pancreas, that particular organ in the brain. So if I want to go ahead and start to explore that, which we have classified under digestive as well as the endocrine system. So again, multidimensional categorization. You don't need to under-categorize or simplify things in the brain. You can have as many different connections as you need. And here I am exploring that. And of course, here's an example of the zoomable icons coming into play. So what we have here, just in terms of the thought relationships, again, for some of the new users, always relative to the active. I've got the jump thoughts are displayed above, child thoughts are displayed below, siblings, thoughts that share the same parent to the right, and then jump thoughts to the left. So these different relationships help me understand at a glance how all this fits together. So for instance, if I were to have just came in to the pancreas from the digestive system, this is everything in the digestive system. We've got the abdominal cavity, duodenum, stomach, all this wonderful stuff that we're, talking about right before lunch here if you're on the Pacific coast. And when I click on pancreas, just so you can get a sense of how things shift and change, these things move to the sides. You still see them as siblings, but then I can also see an additional parent. So it's categorized under two things. And then below this, my child thoughts. So if we were in a folder system, think of these thoughts below as your subfolders here. So what is the pancreas? Getting into different diseases that can affect the pancreas and so forth. And its relationship, again, to diabetes. Now, to some extent, the way you construct these relationships is up to you. It's somewhat arbitrary. For instance, I could have decided that diabetes, because it affects the pancreas, needs to be a parent. So I could put diabetes above pancreas. So when I get to diabetes, it appears here. That would be fine too. In this case, I just like it as a jump thought because it's an organ that's affected. But if I'm looking at this, maybe I'm more of a doctor in the endocrine system, for instance, and I'm more focused on the organ itself. Maybe in this case, diabetes is sort of just one aspect that I treat my patients for. So then maybe diabetes belongs below as a child. So again, there are many ways to construct the brain, and there's really no right or wrong way. Other than I suggest starting with your basic hierarchy first and then making interconnections. But it is very easy to change and modify things. And of course, I can unlink things. If undiagnosed diabetes doesn't make sense next to pancreas, or there's just too many connections, no problem. I'm just going to unlink that too. Or if I don't want it under an area, I can unlink it. So you can see how nicely things come together. But the other thing, in addition to thought types, is you'll notice I've got a little icon here for tags. So a thought type, you can almost think of it as a glossary. Enables you, when I set a thought type, I can set an icon as well as a color, and it becomes sort of the primary attribute for that thought. But I can also have tags. Now, what tags are, is tags enable me to create additional little categories for my thoughts. further classify my thoughts without necessarily making a connection. So I have a tag for further research. This is a great tag. I've just tagged a bunch of things that I'm working on in this brain, from diabetes prevention to human insulin project to all kinds of things here. So if I want to know what stuff requires further research, or I have more time, or I need to work on, I can simply look at that tag. Tags. Another tag that I have in my educational brain is hot research topic. So when we have meetings with people, these were the things that really got people talking. And from there, I can go ahead and see that, high cholesterol. Here's my research on this, and I've made a couple notes here. And that takes me back up to the biological system and the human body and life sciences area in my brain. And then in terms of visualizing more formal classifications, you can also do that as well. So for instance, we have a section here in this particular brain on living things. And here's a diagram here. And you can see that I've got a link to the Wikipedia. I love mapping out the Wikipedia in the brain. I just think it's wonderful. But I can click on animals. And from there, I've got a thought type for kingdom, and then a thought type for phylum, the living system classification. And I can click, I'm going to go to phylum core data, things that have a backbone. And from there, I can go to the class of living species, and class is purple, which is mammals, and, continue to browse. And from there, if I want to go into cats or dogs, I'll go into cats because, of course, they're cute. I've got the family of animal appearing in green, and you see they all have the same icon. And then, of course, that takes us into, different genus, and then, of course, I can get into species. So we've got the puma here, and all different, the lynx, and you can, and the cheetah. So you can see again, and I've just used zoomable icons here. Again, copying, pasting images as that thought icon is just, it's really fun as well. And it really makes for a wonderful brain. And just another quick example for thought typing. Here's the United States president. So in this particular example, and I'm sorry, it may be dated. I don't know if I even have where we're at for presidents. I can go in by number, and I've joking around here, and I've got the next president is alien life here, which hopefully doesn't happen. But anyway, you can see that I've got they're all enumerated chronologically. But they also have thought types. And here's my thought types for Democratic presidents, Federalist presidents, which we did have another political party way back when, and as well as Republican presidents. And then from there, I can continue to browse into their history. And I've got some really cool images as well. So this is just a nice example of how you can take large sums of knowledge and really visualize this. And this is under United States government. I have links to how different presidents were working through the Industrial Revolution. Just some really cool stuff. So I'm organizing by thought types, but I can arrange by name. If I arrange by name, then what that does is it actually goes ahead and it puts the chronological listings. Now you can see the thought types are mixed because obviously we've had presidents of many different political parties throughout history. So now we're just going chronologically, but of course I can right click on my background and arrange those thoughts by date modified. That might make more sense to you. Date activated, type. We were doing type before, but that's the other reason that you might want to add thought types, because if you want to sort of further, some people like looking at lots of thoughts in their brain. Other people like to further categorize. Again, it's a preference, but this is a way with the thought types to look at. You can see I've got like 45 child thoughts here under presidents. To do it with the thought typing, I'm just getting that a little bit extra information. And of course, I could even, do a search for if I just want to start typing in, Theodore Roosevelt or any of the other interesting things. Number 26, I can do that through search, or I can click on him, and of course that shows all kinds of interesting things in the brain as well. And of course, these particular presidents are appearing in different areas and different spectrums and all sorts of ways in the United States government. So that's a little bit on kind of how to visually organize and classify and create a visual inquiry into knowledge. What I want to do is pass presenter over to Matt so he can get a little bit more into the details on his examples, as well as how to take these brains and publish them and share them as well.
Great, thank you, Shelley. So I'll go ahead and show my screen. There we go. And the brain that I've chosen to share with you today, when the topic of today's webinar came up, finding and seeing how the brain can make you smarter, I immediately went to the idea of sharing my Shakespeare brain. So Shakespeare, reading Shakespeare and learning about Shakespeare is a hobby of mine. It's a personal interest. And this brain, I can say for a fact, has made me smarter on that topic. Now, saving data, saving information, that can happen in so many different types of applications. This particular brain has the complete works of Shakespeare. So I'll give you a little tour very quickly. If I go down into literature, every word ever written by Shakespeare is here in this brain. So I can go into comedy and Midsummer Night's Dream on the thoughts over on the right, or the content for that thought. I'll have a quick synopsis, a summary. If I'm going to go see a Shakespearean play, I might want to read the summary so I know what I'm getting into. The actual full script is here as a file attachment, so I could read the entire script right here from the brain. So it's complete works. They're all here in the brain. But as I mentioned, a file repository can do that. Dropbox, Google Drive. I could, copy all of these documents, save them somewhere. Great, I have them preserved. But the great thing about the brain is that I can visualize and understand so much more about each individual play, about Shakespeare himself, about the characters, by actually looking at the relationships between characters, the links that I draw between them, and how I store that information here in the brain. So I've selected, just randomly came into the area of literature, comedy. There's A Midsummer Night's Dream. I also have a link, and I'm going to be returning back to this thought, but notice that I've got a link up to 1594, Lord Chamberlain. So for a period of time, Shakespeare was basically hired by Lord Chamberlain, and these are the plays that he wrote while he was in that stage of his life. So you can see there's no plays written under birth, but I have some information about where he was born, getting married, the lost years, and finally the beginning. And in the very beginning, the first plays that are attributed to Shakespeare, all comedies. He started out just as a comedy writer. So Taming of the Shrew, Comedy of Errors, Two Gentlemen of Verona. Again, just that little bit of extra context about Shakespeare lets you know more and understand more about what you're reading and where Shakespeare was in his life when he wrote particular plays. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a bit. But jumping back over to Midsummer Night's Dream, so I know about when he wrote this, other plays he was writing at the time. Let's take a look at my child thoughts down below. Child thoughts, I typically keep track of, again, a little character synopsis of who this person is in the play. Sometimes there's similarities between characters in one play and characters in another. He really loved some characters so much that he took characteristics of that particular character and worked them into, can be seen in other areas of other plays. But this is very interesting. In A Midsummer Night's Dream, Theseus loves Hippolyta. Hippolyta loves Theseus. So that's a fairly straightforward relationship. These are sort of the king and queen in the play. And let's jump down to Titania, who asks Puck to cast a couple of spells on some different characters. He casts a spell on Lysander, one of the main four. There's 4 lovers within the play. And this is very interesting. Let's take a closer look. Lysander loves Helena. So I can click and go to the Helena thought. Helena loves Demetrius. Click and go to the Demetrius thought. Demetrius loves Hermia. And of course, in classic Shakespearean style, Hermia loves Lysander. So full circle uh, through um, through all these relationships. And in the end, everything works out fine. There's more details, obviously, about that in my synopsis of the characters. But once again, just a better, nice visual understanding of the relationships of characters within this particular play. And another feature that I'm using here in this particular brain are the jump thoughts over to related pieces of information. Remember, Shelley shared with us that a jump thought is where you can really break away from any type of hierarchical structure that you may be creating in the brain. A Midsummer Night's Dream, the components, the building blocks are the characters, so I have them all linked as children down below. It falls under the category of comedy as well as Lord Chamberlain's Men, but it has a jump thought to related pieces of information. And in this case, it's different movies. I'm always linking to a movie of a particular play that I like. So obviously there was a very fantastic movie, Midsummer Night's Dream, obviously word for word. But there's a really great movie that came out in the early 90s called LA Story and starred Steve Martin and Sarah Jessica Parker. And the synopsis of LA Story is A Midsummer Night's Dream. Here, instead of running off into the woods in the middle of the evening, I think they all drive to Santa Barbara for the weekend. But it's very, very closely related. Even the characters' names are closely related to characters from A Midsummer Night's Dream. So I'm keeping track of other fun related pieces of information. I mentioned earlier that by drawing these connections, we can see and understand a little bit more about Shakespeare himself. And so I'm going to jump over to one more area before I start talking about how I share this brain with other users and how brains can be created in academia and educational institutions to help students guide them through processes of classes and topics, etc. So before I do that, let me share one last component. I'm going to jump really quickly over to tragedy, and actually maybe I'll just do a quick search. I'm going to search for, let's see, I think I have it under, the name is escaping me right now, history, tragedy, and maybe I do have it under comedy. Actually, I'll go this way. So even for a Shakespearean expert, the names escape me from time to time. So I am going to jump into sort of my timeline chart and go to Shakespeare's retirement. There it is, The Tempest. I was trying to think of the name The Tempest, and it was completely escaping me. And yes, I do have that filed under comedy. So a great example of how you can find information in your brain, even if you can't remember the name of the thought that you're looking for. I knew that this was a play that was written towards the end of Shakespeare's life. So instead of going through comedy, I clicked down through retirement and still able to find what I was looking for. And the key component, that really is the crux of the situation for this example. The Tempest was Shakespeare's last play. And because, I had read The Tempest in college and I didn't think much of it. It was sort of a play that was lost on me. Is it a comedy? Is it a tragedy? I mean, at the very end, this man is sent off into the wild and departs all of his family and friends and bids farewell. But later in my life, when I started putting this brain together and I decided to classify all the different plays and when they were written in Shakespeare's life, this is Shakespeare's last play. It's maybe not only a farewell to the stage, but a farewell to life. And Prospero, the magician that decides to, I think in the end, he drowns his magic book. That's Shakespeare giving up writing. He's done. He's retired, saying goodbye to the stage and farewell to life. So it's very, very interesting to read through it under that concept. Again, gives it really packs a punch. And once again, I've got all of my character studies, all of my resources. That retirement was just a key connection that I made in my life. It's always stuck with me. And let's take a look once again, a great movie, once again, The Tempest, but Forbidden Planet. If anyone ever remembers the movie Forbidden Planet with Robbie the robot, is actually a very strong take on The Tempest. Has a lot of hidden meaning that came originally from The Tempest in there. And actually, I should link this up to a movie called Shakespeare in Love. There, I've got it, Shakespeare in Love, because at the end of the play, in order to keep the two characters apart, one goes off and they sort of weave it into the story that as he decides he's leaving the love of his life, never to return again, he's never going to see her again, he writes a play called The Tempest. So some powerful stuff that can be hidden in the connections, in the visualization of your data within the structure of the brain. So let's go ahead now and talk about, now that I've learned so much from this particular brain, I enjoy sharing this brain with others. So I want to talk a little bit about how I do that. And every brain that you create, if you've got the Brain Pro combo, or a services subscription, so you can sync your brain up to the cloud. That brain is very secure when you sync it to the cloud. It's password protected. And only you, by default, when you sync your brain to the cloud, have access to that brain. The advantage is I can then open this brain on other devices. I can sync my brain to my home machine, my traveling laptop. I can access it from my iOS devices. So the sync process begins with just clicking on the cloud icon. Now, you may have noticed as I had this brain open, I saw some of Shelly's brain, the brains would display, the auto sync would kick off. So by default, when you sync a brain up to the cloud, that auto sync is going to be turned on, and you can turn that on and off in the properties. You can see my sync is up to date, and this brain is set to syncing automatically. So you can very easily turn that on and off. If you only want to sync after you've made a vast array of changes and then sync to the cloud, but not have it sync in between, that's totally your choice. But I'm going to click on online and talk about some of the properties here. Again, turning on and off the sync automatically. I can copy a WebSauce URL. Now that it's synced up to the cloud, I can send others a URL so they can not only get to my brain online, they can get to a specific thought. I want to send a friend a link to my thought on The Tempest. I simply copy this WebSauce URL, I tweet it out, I drop it in an email, etc. But as I mentioned earlier, your brains are password protected until you choose to share them publicly. So now I'm going to open up brain access and sharing, and there's a lot that can be done in this one prompt, this one pop-up window here in the brain. As you can see, I am sharing this brain. So I've checked this box. By default, this would not be checked. I have it checked, so I'm allowing public access. And there's the URL for the brain. So the brain itself will start out on the home thought of the brain. Each individual thought has a URL. This is the URL for the home thought, that Shakespeare thought that this brain starts out with. So I can copy this URL. I've got it on my clipboard. Once again, I email it out to friends and family or colleagues or whatever the case may be. And only those that have the URL would be able to open this brain online. So let's take a look at what that looks like online. I'm going to open up my browser. I'm here at the brain. I'm going to log in. Now I could paste that URL in. If I don't log in, I'll have read-only access. So this is what the general public would see if I send out this URL. Here it is. All my information, even if I go back to, if I do a search for The Tempest.
Matt, a couple people were asking actually for if Shakespeare was online and they'd love to browse it online. So I don't know if we can put that in the sharing notes or tweet that out
Absolutely.
later today.
Yeah, I'll share this when there's a thank you note that will go out to everyone that's joined or signed up for the webinar today. So I'll absolutely be sure to share a link there so anyone can navigate to my brain online. Now notice I can try to click and create a new link. I will not be able to do that. This is read-only mode. Anyone that I tweet this URL to will see my brain in read-only mode. So you would actually need to log in, and here I'm on my other tab. I'm on the login screen. I'll go ahead and log into my account. where I have access to all my different brains. Now, I've got many more brain databases potentially than the average person. I share brains with other colleagues, I've got brains on other topics. I like smaller topic-specific brains, so I've got a lot of different brain databases, as you can see. But now that I'm logged in, I can actually go in and open my Shakespeare brain. It's loading up right down here. I can actually open my Shakespeare brain online and continue on making edits. So I can launch Shakespeare here in my browser, and from the web interface, I can add new thoughts. So I can add a new thought name. I don't need to add any new content there, but I can also add file attachments, upload a file, enter URL, so I can continue building my brain, even if I'm just logging into it from the web from another machine. And I saw the question come up earlier in the chat all about iPhones. Can I access data on iPhones? And you certainly can. We have an iPhone app and an Android app. And I am launching, I'm going to move my camera over so I can see. But as you can see, here is my brain. I opened up one of my recipe brains, so I opened up a barbecue recipe there. But as you can see, I can scroll through my brain list. And
that's great. Lisa was actually asking if we're going to have a webinar soon on iOS too. And I said we also next week, but I don't know if we have, probably don't have time to launch the simulator in this example, but you can see it on Matt's phone.
Yeah.
And our next
I didn't think I would be
webinar on
too long, so I didn't set up the simulator. There, it's actually downloading.
October 4th, Lisa, too. Our webinar on information and knowledge context on the go will actually have the iOS simulator showing through the webinar, but I'll let Matt finish on his publishing before we get into that.
Sure. So I've got access to my brain from my device, from my pocket. I've got access to all of this information anywhere I go. And that's a really, really valuable tool. And the question did come up. I believe Donna had the question earlier about are internal files available to you when you're opening from your device, your iOS device, or from other machines? And yes, they certainly are. Anything that you put internally into the brain, whether it's copied, the file is copied in, or moved internally into the brain, those internal documents are synced with the brain. So they are accessible from the brain wherever you're accessing the brain, from your iOS device or mobile devices or from other machines. So I also want to share with you just a couple of more features with regards to syncing your brain to the cloud. Let me come back to the desktop version of my brain. A more advanced feature of the application is what we call Team Brain. And Team Brain allows multiple people to collaborate on the same brain. And you can learn more about Team Brain on our website, but I really quickly just want to give you a glimpse as to how it works. Again, I've synced this brain to the cloud. I have access from my phone, from my other devices. I want to give Shelly some access to this brain as well. So from my team, she's a member of my team, so she appears here in my drop-down list. I can also manually type in an email address and invite them if they have Team Brain access to edit and collaborate in this brain. And you can see by default, Shelly is now a writer. I can right click and say, all right, I want to give Shelly read-only access to this brain, or make her an administrator. It's your choice. I'll go ahead and give Shelly writer access and save. And as soon as that is saved, Shelly's actually going to receive an email welcoming her. She's going to have editor access to the Shakespeare brain and can start collaborating. Once you're collaborating in the brain, you can actually review who's modifying thoughts and when. So each individual thought has its own history. And so far, it's only been me, as you saw on the other screen, in this particular brain. But I can go thought by thought and find out when thoughts were last modified, when notes, you can see back in 2017 is when I made some changes. That's actually when I started using version 9 of the brain that keeps track of every change on every individual thought. So I know when thoughts were made and who made those changes. Again, more advanced feature, that's Team Brain, and you can learn more about Team Brain by contacting us at support@thebrain.com, or sending an email into support rather, or just checking out further on our website. But taking a step back from Team Brain, it's still very easy to sync your brain to the cloud, share that URL with other users, whether they're classmates, your professor, what have you, can share that brain. So even if they're not using the brain, they can log in from the web interface and still be able to access all of that valuable information. And I think with that, Shelley, I'll see if we have any additional questions. I see we're coming up right at the end of the hour. So now's a great time to ask any additional questions that you may have about what we've demoed today.
All right, great. Yes, and we do have. We'll just continue on a little bit with what you're talking about with the web and sharing. Bill has a question regarding TheBrain and sharing a brain. Can you see what team members have changed?
You certainly can. So once again, I'm in, and maybe I'll jump into another brain really quickly to share that with you. But as you can see, these are the recent changes. So today I did make a couple of changes in this particular brain. Let's go ahead and open up another brain that Shelley and I have been collaborating in. Totally different topic. This is on a sports apparel and lifestyle marketing company. Shelley and I, again, just a sample brain in this case that Shelley and I use for some demonstrations. And I'm going to click on the thought history. And the thought history is showing me everything that's been recently modified. So you see, there's my little icon. I've been making a lot of changes. Aha, if I scroll down, I can see that Shelley made some changes. She created some new content regarding the international study back on September 19th. And I can scroll through this further and probably even find, the farther I scroll, find more changes done by other people. So I'm seeing who made those changes. And when I mouse over a thought, I see specifically what change was made. And this brain might not be up to sync. So I'll go ahead and sync this brain. Nope, it is up to sync. So those are all the most recent changes. There's further options. I can go into the reports and say, I'll just demo this really quickly. Show me all attachments that have been modified within the past month. So here's all the monthly or thoughts that have an attachment that have been modified within the past month. And I can click on any one of these and specifically what's changed. I'll open up the thought history. So that's all Shelley on that particular thought. So I can certainly see, again, what changes are being made, who's making those changes in a collaborative environment.
And that's the fun part too. You know, all that knowledge assimilation that you do kind of on your own, when you get your team involved, it's just great because you're really becoming the mind of many. So I might have expertise in marketing, Matt might have more expertise in implementation and installation, and Brigitte has expertise in customer service. But when we create that brain together, it becomes this powerful knowledge network. So I definitely encourage you to experiment with colleagues, coworkers on TheBrain. And then just to answer a few more questions there, Bill had a question as far as, is there versioning with working with teams? And the answer to that is actually no. It's more, you can almost think of it as a visual wiki. We do track the changes, so the changes are there, but it's sort of a live, living knowledge base. So it's not like a document, it's a database. So as you're going in and modifying things, people are, changing things. And of course, you can control who gets access to do what. You might want to have, let's say you're a sales organization, your sales executives all working together on the brain, but you might publish to your junior sales reps in read-only mode. So you can sort of decide, maybe half of your group is an editor, half of them are readers, and then they could also create a separate brain for another project where they're having fun together in a brain. So there's lots of different possibilities.
We're in a great location. Just to piggyback onto that comment very quickly. Shelley mentioned, some of the read-only users don't have access to some of the thoughts. So here's a great example. You can see this area under Sports Zone, track shoes. It's a new topic that we're putting together. Shelley and I are both editors in this brain. We've got full access. We can access this information. But notice this little red lock icon. Those thoughts have been marked as private. So therefore, all those read-only users that are logging into this brain in read-only mode online and navigating through the structure, when they get down to Sports Zone, they will not see track shoes and these affiliated or connected thoughts down below, because those have been marked as private. So only those of us in TheBrain that are writing in this brain have access to that data.
All right, great. And just to let you know, we are officially on the hour. We're going to go for another 5-7 minutes just to answer all the great questions that are coming in. Thanks to all of you. But also, everyone wants to know, can we look at these brains, the teaching and learning brain, Shakespeare, can we use them? So I did, I think it was, I can't remember. Yeah, it was Diane that I put the link out, thebrain.com/apps. But I just want to highlight to those of you, especially those of you that are jumping off, we have some incredible examples on our applications page where you can watch the video and download the brain and go to town and copy these thoughts or change them. Yes, these examples, and I believe, is your Shakespeare brain available for download as well? Okay, excellent, excellent. So yeah, you can take those thoughts and go to town on any of the comedies or tragedies, and do what you will with Matt's thoughts, and take advantage of Matt's knowledge as well. And I guess so. This is the page. Matt's got it up there. And I just want to point that out to you because these are free templates for your use. That I know a lot of people are not necessarily familiar with. And you can also, a lot of them have the online example too, that you can just, if you just want to browse without the download, you can see my piano brains there. And you can click on that and look at it online, as well as the teaching and learning brain. And that's fine too. So you can see these brains are published. And there it is. And I guess, let me see here, just going through several more questions. David had a question about, can brains be merged? The answer to that is yes, and I'll let Matt kind of show you, how that's done. Maybe we can talk a little bit about merging and copying and maybe modifying thoughts.
Absolutely. You can merge brains together. You can segment them apart into smaller topic-specific brains. Those are some more advanced features of the application, but they're certainly there. They're certainly available. To merge a brain, there's a few different steps that you need to go through. So let's say I had, Shelley really likes my Shakespeare brain, but she has a writer's brain that's all about writing. Edgar Allan Poe and Agatha Christie and tons of authors. Shakespeare is just a small component that she wants to merge into that brain. So let's send Shelley a copy of this brain that she can merge into her writer's brain. I'm going to click on File and select to back up to Brain Archive. So backing up a brain archive, and the question came in earlier, can you sort of timestamp a brain and save it in archival segments or what have you? This is a way to manually do that. If I want to, I really like the way the brain looks today, but I know tomorrow I'm going to be doing a lot of work in here. In case I mess something up, I'll probably back up to a brain archive first. So if I want to keep my brain archive safe, I can select to only allow permitted users, in other words, editors of editors or administrators of a brain, to actually extract the data. If I want anyone, if I just want to share this brain with the world, allow anyone, and I'm just going to save this onto my desktop, and I'll back that up. And so very quickly, I will have, and there it is. It's over on my other monitor. Let me just bring this up so you can see. There's my BRZ file. So that's a brain archive. That brain archive can be emailed out. It's a single file that can be emailed out to other interested parties. You can email this to Shelley, and when Shelley receives this brain, she'll click on File and select to import. And these are all the different import options that we have. You can import other mind mapping applications to take them on to the next step for unlimited mind mapping. You can import properly formatted text files, so a tab delineated text files. And there it is, BRZ. So I'm going to select BRZ. I'll go through and select the file.
And then just real quick, and you're probably going to get to this, the most important thing then, if I want to merge into an existing brain, is on that radial button there, instead of create a new brain, I'd go to that. I'd be on the brain before that. In this case, you're not going to import a Shakespeare brain into a Shakespeare brain.
That's right.
And we don't have time for me to take presenter and show you all this. So I'll just say, so let's say this is me and I have my writer's brain open, and that would say add to my writer's brain. You just want to select that second one, because you can take these archives and create a new brain, which actually, to be honest, for our downloads, I recommend you do that first, just so you can look at them. But in this case, I know I want Matt's brain, so I would do add to Shakespeare into my brain. And then once you do that, that is essentially the merge, that radial button right there, and import.
That's right. Now, an export is a different topic. Very quickly, I realize I'm trying to be time sensitive. let's say Shelley is specifically interested in all of the comedy plays and their characters. I am going to control click on comedy. So now I'm just taking a section of a very large brain and just copying that section, the components I'm interested in, to then merge into another brain. So I'm going to control click on this thought. If you're on a Mac, this would be with a command click. And I can control click on thoughts however I choose. So one at a time I can control click. I can control click on a gate to grab all of those thoughts, or even drag a square around a grouping of thoughts. So the control click works in many different ways, and you can add thoughts in and out of your selection box. I'm back to just one thought, the comedy thought. Now I click on edit and select related thoughts. So I go to edit, select related thoughts, and I'm going to add to my selection box child word for, we'll keep it small, 3 generations. I'll go 4 generations away. So not bad. That adds 50 thoughts into my selection box. I can now right click and copy those 50 thoughts. And now I'll create the new brain. I'll create the new comedy brain that I will be sharing with Shelley, or segmenting into another specific brain. Anytime you create a new brain, it selects one of your wallpapers randomly. I like that wallpaper, so I'll leave that there. And I right click and paste these 50 thoughts. So I've copied sort of a branch of one brain and pasted into another brain from scratch. So the only 50 thoughts in this brain are going to be sort of that comedy section from my other master brain. And from here,
that's pretty cool. Maybe I'll just take this one. I like this one too. It's good. nice little focused brain.
Absolutely. And it brings everything, all the thought types, the thought tags that you might be using, all the file attachments. So Midsummer Night's Dream, all the character studies, the links, etc. It's all still there and accessible. Now, remember, I selected only to add to my selection box childward thoughts. So jump thoughts are not included. That is because I specifically said only child thoughts. So working in that direction, that's what I added to the selection box, and that's what shows up in the new brain.
All right, looking good. And then several more questions. And I apologize if we can't get to them all, but there is one that I do want to get to. It's about attaching file links versus, I guess, shortcuts versus the actual file. So Brian writes, is there an easy way to attach Dropbox links to a brain so that I can access? Actually, he wants to access on the iOS without the attachments to keep the file size down. But we can maybe just expand on that question as well, and talk about whether you link to a shortcut versus a actual file. And just to preference that, when we're linking to shortcuts, we're not syncing the file in your brain for local use. You're simply getting that shortcut. So real quick, we're going to launch a URL. Whether it launches in that app is if the app's running, if it needs to be logged in. The brain in that case is just acting as a remote controlled Dropbox, Brian. But theoretically, yes, you can attach a URL to Dropbox and the brain will launch it.
That is absolutely correct. So by default, when you install the brain, I'm going to click on options and go into my preferences. A Mac user will click on the brain, then preferences. And on the UI tab, you can select how you want the brain to behave for drag and drop. Now there's some shortcuts, some keyboard keystrokes you can use, or you can simply change the default. So by default, you're copying files into the brain. You take a copy of the original, now you've got an internal attachment in your brain database. If you're only interested in linking to files, you want to keep the file size of the brain down and you just want to link to where that file exists, I can change the default. Or if I want to move files into brain, I can do that. I'm going to leave it on copy for now, and I'll share with you. Let me just open up a sample directory. I'll go into my C drive, and so I've got a sample directory. I'm going to use a shortcut. You specifically mentioned any quick ways to get a link to a file into the brain.
Yeah.
I'm going to grab
He actually wants the opposite of Donna, and I'll just add, so he wanted to just do the shortcut, and Donna's asking the opposite question, which we might have to engage both of you in more of a longer support chat since we're on the end of this webinar, but Donna wants to know the opposite. She wants that folder in her brain and wants it accessible through iOS, which I don't know, can we actually show the folder through iOS too? I'm not sure. I'd have to check on that.
Not folders, but individual files you certainly can. So on my Shakespeare brain, I can open all those file attachments on my iPhone. I'll log in and do that in just a moment. But if you're just looking for a shortcut, I'm going to override the default setting of drag and drop copies of file in, and I'm just going to grab a sample document here. So product comparisons, Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to click on Alt on my keyboard, or press Alt, drag and drop product comparisons. And instead of making a copy by pressing Alt, that was the shortcut to override copying a file in, and it just simply linked the file in. The file is actually still located on my C drive in RH Architects. So that's where the actual file resides. When I sync this brain to the cloud and access this brain from another device or from my mobile device, whatever that other device is, it's going to be looking on the C drive in RH Architects. So obviously on a mobile device, this link is not going to work. On another machine, if this folder isn't there on the C drive, it's not going to work. So Dropbox, the great thing about Dropbox is you've got not only a link to the local file, but you can link to the online file. You've got a URL, and that URL is going to work from wherever you are. From my local machine right now, it's going to work from, and I think I have Dropbox. So let me just open up Dropbox really quickly. My local Dropbox directory.
And while you're looking for that, I will mention too, I don't want to confuse people because we can link to files in Dropbox, but we often get the question, can I sync my brain through Dropbox? And the answer is no, because whereas Dropbox is a file folder system, we're actually a database. So we can grab things from them, but you know, if you want to sync your brain, you have to use our sync services. If you try and sync your brain through their folder system, it doesn't work. So I just want to put that in now because you know, I know people are using various sync services for different things, and I need to let you guys know how they play together and how they don't.
That's right, and you can certainly link to those Dropbox files or link to the shared URL, the online URL from Dropbox. So and of course, if I have two machines set up the exact same way, both at home and at work, and both machines have a C drive with RH Architects in it, then this link will work from my other device if that file is there. So once again, it really depends on how your system is set up and how you want to add attachments and content into your brain. And you can always go back and modify. I've got a link to this file in my brain. If I change my mind, I can right-click and move this file into the brain, or copy this file internally into the brain. How many other shortcuts do I have in this brain? Let's find out. I am going to open my brain and run a report. So now I'm looking for all attachments that are external. And notice I only have 2 files, and the other one I already know is a sample file as well, because I move everything into my brain. So I've got this product comparisons that I set up today, and another sample file that's actually a forgotten thought that exists in this brain. So I don't need either of them. I can activate that thought, right-click, and go ahead and I will delete that particular thought from this brain. So remember or delete. So I want to delete that thought, and refresh, and you can see that thought is no longer existing in this particular brain. So you can always run reports to find those internal attachments, external attachments, and make modifications to them accordingly.
And the great thing about the brain is we're somewhat data and agnostic. For syncing, I absolutely 100% recommend storing your files internally in the brain so you can get them across all your devices. But that being said, to Matt's point, if you have access to that drive on most computers, you know, and a lot of people in, you know, corporate world only have shortcuts to files, that's fine too. You can keep those files on your intranet, on SharePoint, on, wherever, and just link to them. And the brain still becomes that important remote control. And oh, there it is, that gorgeous Shakespeare brain on your phone. Very nice.
And
more
so here
eye
it is on
candy
my
from
phone,
Matt Caton.
and you could see down below, I have a note on, over here, a note on this spot, and there's a little highlighted paperclip. And the paperclip is actually going to, let me click on the right thing, tap on the paperclip. There's my attachment, the full text of the play. And there I've clicked, and it's downloading, and there it is. So yes, extra or internal file attachments do load on mobile devices.
Look at you bringing up Shakespeare plays on your iPhone. Wow. Do we get more Web 2.0 renaissance than that? And on that note, I think we're going to close today's session, but I want to let you know, and I know there were a couple newbies, do join us tomorrow. Join Matt for TheBrain. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not tomorrow because we're doing our webinar. It's Friday, every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We have TheBrain 101 and a lot of mobile questions. So what we'll do is we'll gear up our simulator so Matt can actually demo a lot more on iOS on our next webinar, which is Information on the Go. That one's October 4th. For those of you on iOS or using a lot of devices, feel free, again, to sign up from that. That was featured in our newsletter yesterday. It's also on our homepage. And of course, we offer free support to everyone. And I guess, Matt, before we close today's session, any other final words of wisdom or other wonderful little snippets you want to share with us before we end our session today?
And I'll put the links up there as well for you to download some of these sample brains and begin using them either as the building block for your brain that you're going to create, or just as a sandbox so you can get comfortable and play with the technology. The choice is yours. And of course, we're always available to answer any questions at support@thebrain.com.
All right, great. And finally, we have a lot of academics, teachers. For those of you that are working or a student from an accredited educational institution, I do want to let you know that we offer academic discounts, 20% on the software licenses as well as services. So if you do want to get that discount, you can actually call in on our support line or chat with us or write in, and as long as you can provide the credential, we do offer academic discounts as well to help you out. And so with that, we look forward to seeing you on a future web technology event, and I wish you all in your art of visual inquiry and hope that it's fruitful and as inspiring as the Shakespeare brain and beyond, and hope to see you again on future Brain Technologies events. Thanks everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks everyone.